بسم الله أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه من والاه الحمد لله. ومنها أن يكون أكثر اهتمامه بعلم الباطن ومراقبة القلب ومعرفة طريق الآخرة وسلوكه وصدق الرجاء في انكشاف ذلك. So he says amongst the signs of the scholars of the next world is that they're more concerned about inward knowledge and about being vigilant about the states of the heart and knowing the path to the akhirah and the wayfaring and having sincere hope in that being unveiled to them. من المجاهدة والمراقبة. So mujahada is struggling with yourself. Muraqaba is guarding your states. It's being vigilant about the state that you're in. So the muraqib is the one who's aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ, when he was asked, Jibreel asked him about أخبرني عن الإحسان. He said, أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. That you worship Allah as if you see Him, and if you don't see Him, at least you know He sees you. So these are the two states of muraqabah. The first is the highest, which is you worship Allah as if you're in a state of mushahada. But if you're not in the witnessing, then at least you know that Allah is witnessing you. So these are the two states, and it's a high station, and the practice of muraqabah. The best thing to do is to have a practice that you're consistent with. So you do you take a wird in the morning and in the evening. Do the Quranic wird, which is like Yasin in the morning. You do the Waqi'ah and Mulk. And then you can add to those like Alif Lam Mim Sajda also at the end of the day. And then you can do Dukhan, Hamim Dukhan. And then you can add to that. The best thing to do is try to do a khatam of Quran every month. At least do it twice a year. Abu Hanifa said if you do it less than twice a year, then you're actually stinting on the haqq of the Quran. And you're from the people that اتخذوا القرآن مهجورا, that they abandon the Quran. So it's important to do it once during Ramadan at least, and then once throughout the rest of the year. But to have a wird from the Quran is important, to do something from the Quran. Also trying to memorize the Quran, taking some verses and memorizing them that you could pray with. And then having the adhkar in the morning and the evening. The wird al-latif is a good wird. It's an over-the-counter wird. It's not, you don't have to get a prescription for that one. Some they're specific to certain people. The 99 names, you shouldn't do any of the names like over and over again, because the names have khasiyah, and they can actually be dangerous for people if they're doing the names over and over again, because their tajalliyat can come from a lot of repetition. So you can have things happen that you're really not ready for, something like that. So that's something that you have to be aware of. But doing the 99 names is good. Knowing the names, inna lillahi tis'an wa tis'ina isman man ahsaha dakhala al-jannah. Allah has 99 names. Whoever knows them will enter paradise. And so it's good. Fattah is a good name when you need help in something. Basit when you're feeling depressed. Ya Basitu, Ya Basitu. So that's important. And then he says that with mujahada, it leads to mushahada. So when الَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا اللهم الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says at the end of Ankabut, and this is a surah Makkiyah, so this is not the jihad of Medina, this is the Meccan jihad, which is jihad of the nafs, which precedes the outward jihad. If you don't do jihad of the nafs, it's dangerous to do the outward jihad, because you end up doing what these people that haven't done jihad of their nafs do, which is endangering your faith, inwardly and outwardly. So that's the mujahada that leads to ihtida, that tahtadi. So Allah will actually guide you to His subul, His ways. And that's the mukashafa that he's talking about. And this is daqaiq al-ulum, subtle knowledges that come into the heart. And تتفجر بها ينابيع الحكمة من القلب. Wisdom begins to emerge from the heart. And then he says, one of the things that he says that Sayyidina Ali said in a long hadith, al-qulub aw'iya, that the hearts are vessels, wa khayruha aw'aha, and the best of them are the ones that hold the most. And people are three: alimun rabbani, a scholar who elevates and raises people with sound tarbiyah Muhammadiyah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Wa muta'allimun ala sabil an-najat, and then a student, so a scholar who is not just teaching outwardly but also has an inward state. And then a learner who's on the path of salvation. And then he said, hamajun ra'a'un atba'u kulli na'iq. And then you have the hamaj. In Arabic, hamaj are like insects, but they're used to mean just people that have no education, no training, no adab. They're just like hamaj. And then ra'a are like the rabble, we would say in English, the riffraff and the rabble. So he said, if you're not a scholar or at least a learner on the road to salvation, then you're from the riffraff. And then he says, atba'u kulli na'iq. They'll follow anybody that just shouts out. So they're people that don't have discernment, and they end up just following anybody who comes along. Yamiluna ma'a kulli rih. They incline towards every wind, so they're just blown around like feathers because they're light. And then he said, لم يستضيئوا بنور العلم. They're not guided by the light of knowledge. ولم يلجأوا إلى ركن وثيق. They don't depend on something firm. And knowledge is better than wealth. Knowledge guards you, and you have to guard wealth. Knowledge increases as you expend it. Wealth diminishes as you expend it. The love of the scholar is a religion that we should practice. So dinun yudanu bihi. So it's actually a practice that we should do, just loving scholars. تكتسب به الطاعة في حياته والجميل الأحدوثة بعد موته العلم حاكم ومال محكوم عليه. And so that through the scholar, obedience is acquired in this life, and also you leave behind good memories. People have good memories of you after you're dead. And then knowledge is a ruler, and wealth, you have to rule over it. And then he said the benefit of wealth goes when it goes. But the ulama, they stay. As long as time is here, knowledge is benefited. ثم تنفس الصعداء. Like Shaykh Salih was saying, one of the girls is going to be studying with somebody I mentioned to him in Istanbul, and he said, oh, that's my student. So through him, you'll become my student. Because the student of a student is a student in that lineage, that we're people of isnad. We believe in the silsila, that there's links in this chain, living links, and those chains of the past are still there, right? You know what a flake is? Do you use that word in England? Who's from England? Do you use that word? Flake? Yeah. What is it in Australia? You can't rely on them. Exactly. That's a flake. Flaky people. In California, they say it's flaky. A flake is actually, flaking the chain was something sailors did. So before they set sail, they would take the chains and hit them with a hammer because they oxidize, out in the salt water. So you can have a weak link. And so the flaking was to make sure that the chain was strong so it wouldn't break on the journey. And so that's the importance of, being in a strong chain, is that the links are strong. And obviously, unfortunately, as time passes, the links get weaker. Just like a photocopy, each copy gets less and less. But you're still, to be in those chains is a blessing. Like for instance, I have isnad back to Imam Al-Ghazali through Shaykh Abdullah, through Shaykh Muhammad Al-Aqubi, through Shaykh Ahmed Jabir, and through others. So it's a link back to the Imam. So each one studied with them, and then they gave permission to teach it. And there's a blessing in that, because there's a secret in that tradition. And so then تنفس صعدا. Imam Ali, you can imagine this is in the riwayah. It said تنفس صعدا. He heaved a heavy sigh. Ha. And then he said ha. Like the Arabs say that, like إنها هنا علما جما لو وجدت له حملا. There's so much knowledge in here. If I could only find people that could carry it. بل أجد طالبا غير مأمون يستعمل آلة الدين في طلب الدنيا. This is Imam Ali complaining. I see seekers that aren't trustworthy. They're looking to use the religion as a tool to get dunya. ويستطير بنعم الله على أوليائه ويستظهر بحججه على خلقه ومنقادا لأهل الحق أو منقادا لأهل. So they're using it just to elevate themselves over others. لكن ينزرع الشك في قلبه بأوي عرض من شبهة. But doubt comes to their hearts for the first difficult obfuscation that comes along. لا بصيرة له لا ذا ولا ذاك أو منهوما باللذات سلس القياد في طرب الشهوات. Or they're just completely immersed in pleasures, incontinent, سلس القياد, incontinent in seeking after their appetites. They can't control themselves, no restraint. Allah. He said one majlis of knowledge will make takfir of 70 majlis of entertainment. So it's important to do that. And then he said, this is how knowledge dies. And this is how the earth loses the proofs for God. He said, إِمَّا ظَاهِرٌ مَكْشُوفٌ. Sometimes those proofs are evident and outward, and other times, وَإِمَّا خَائِفٌ مَقْهُورٌ. Or they're hiding, they're afraid to come out. And this is the thing about أَوْجَسَ فِي نَفْسِهِ خِيفَةً. I mean, even Ibrahim alayhi salam had fear. He was taking his hidr. The people from the Kahf, they fled persecution to the cave. This whole idea of going out and just, standing and we're going to get massacred and somehow, where is that? You know, the Prophet ﷺ, when they fled back to Medina, they fled the battlefield when they fought. Khalid came back and he said that we were farun, we fled. And he said, bal karun. No, you came back to fight another day. There's times to withdraw, there's times to fight. And this is one of the secrets of our ummah, is that because it was an ummah based on intelligence, that there were times to do things and times not to do things. And one of the secrets of the early victories of the Muslims was the kar-far tactic. In fact, one of the things in Sahih Muslim that Amr, when he, Mustawrid al-Qurashi, when he said in Bab al-Fitan, Mustawrid al-Qurashi, he said, تَقُمَ السَّاعَةُ وَالرَّوْمُ أَكْثَرُ النَّاسِ. The hour won't come until the Europeans are the majority of people. And that's by tashabbuh, by just outward appearance. You're from the people. مَنْ تَشَبَّهَ بِقَوْمٍ فَهُوَ مِنْهُمْ, the Prophet said. If you look like a people, behave like them, you're one of them. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ predicted that the European culture would be the dominant culture all over the planet. That's a hadith sahih. Amazing. And Amr couldn't believe it. He said, Absir ma taqul. Think about what you're saying. He said, Wallahi sami'tu min Rasulillah. I heard the Prophet say it. He said, Inna fihim la khisalan arba'. They have 4 qualities. And then he said, Ahlamun nas 'inda al-musiba. Or 'inda musibatin. That they're very forbearing when calamities happen. They have a lot of hilm in their nature. And he said, أسرعهم إفاقة بعد أحلم الناس عند فتنة, that they're the most forbearing when you have a fitna, like civil strife and calamity. They show a lot of restraint. And then he said, وَأَسْرَعُهُمْ كَرَّةً بَعْدَ فَرَّ. And they're the quickest to come back after they've fled. They're the quickest to come back after they've been defeated. You look at Germany, amazing, how they came back after World War II. And then he said, أَوْشَكُهُمْ إِفَاقَةً بَعْدَ مُصِيبَةٍ. That they're the quickest to get back on their feet after they have something that afflicts them. And they're the quickest to أسرعهم كرة بعد فرة, that they're the quickest to attack once they've retreated. And then he said, وخيرهم لمسكين وضعيف ويتيم, the مسكين ويتيم وضعيف, and they're the kindest to the orphans and the weak and the handicapped. And then he said, وخامسة حسنة جميلة أمنعهم من ظلم الملوك. They're the ones that stop their rulers from oppressing more than other people. So he noted the good qualities in them. But they're definitely the dominant culture right now. And so people, sometimes you have khaifun maqhur. They withdraw, like the people of the cave. They withdrew from the society. لِأَلَا تَبْطُلَ حُجَجُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى وَبَيِّنَاتُهُ, so that the proofs of God don't dissipate or are lost. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْأَقَلُّونَ عَدَدًا, they're few in number. الْأَعْظَمُونَ قَدْرًا, but they have great stature. أَعْيَانُهُمْ مَفْقُودَةٌ وَأَمْثَالُهُمْ فِي الْقُلُوبِ مَوْجُودَةٌ. You might not see them, their essence, but their hearts are present. يَحْفَظُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى بِهِمْ حُجَجُهُ حَتَّى يُدِعُوهَا نُظَرَاؤُهُم. They preserve the proofs of God until they find places to put them amongst people like them. يَزْرَعُوهَا فِي قُلُوبِ أَشْبَاهِهِمْ. They plant them in the hearts of people like them. And then بَاشِرُوا رُوحَ الْيَقِينِ, or بَاشَرُوا. They have direct contact with the spirit of certainty. فَاسْتَلَانُوا مَا اسْتَوَعَرَ مِنْهُ. So they find easy what's difficult from it, or what the mutrafun found difficult from it, the extravagant ones. وَأَنِسُوا بِمَا اسْتَوْحَشَ مِنْهُ الْغَافِلُونَ. They're intimate with the things that the heedless people find alien. وَصَاحِبُ الدُّنْيَا بِأَبْدَانٍ أَرْوَحُهُمْ مُعَلَّقَةٌ بِالْمَحَلِّ الْأَعْلَى. Their bodies are in the world, but their spirits are in the highest place. أُولَٰئِكَ أَوْلِيَاءُ اللَّهِ. These are the awliya. And these are the trustworthy ones. And these are God's workers in the earth. And these are the ones who invite to His religion. So that's Imam Ali saying, ثُمَّ بَكَى. And then he wept. وَشَوْقَاهُ. And then he said, oh, would that I could just see them. Abu Na'im mentions that, وَالْخَطِيبِ in Tarikh al-Baghdad. And he said, this is all you need to know if you want to know the ulama of the akhirah. Imam Al-Ghazali says, the eighth one is that they should be very concerned about cultivating yaqeen in their hearts. Remember, he talked about the yaqeen, and then I did that already. Yeah, so we went through that. Prophet The Prophet ﷺ was asked what actions are better, and he said, "Ijtinab al-maharam," to avoid what's prohibited. وَلَا يَزَالُ فُوكَ رَطَبًا مِنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ, and your tongue should always be moist with the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are many hadiths that indicate that. اذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ حَتَّى يَقُولُوا مَجْنُونَ. Remember Allah until they say he's a madman, because it looks like you're talking to yourself. I mean, now everybody's talking to themselves with these headphones and things in their ears. And you see people now walking around, they're talking, having conversation, but then you realize they're on the phone, just walking down the street. So, and then they said, فَأَيُّ الْأَصْحَابِ خَيْرٌ, which are the best companions? قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, صَاحِبٌ إِذَا ذَكَرْتَ أَعَانَكَ, when you remember, he helps you. When نَسِيتَ ذَكَّرَكَ, and when you forget, he reminds you. وَقِيلَ وَأَيُّ الْأَصْحَابِ شَرٌّ, and which ones are the worst? He said, صَاحِبٌ إِذَا نَسِيتْ لَمْ يُذَكِّرَكَ, if you forget, he doesn't remind you, and ذَكَرْتْ لَمْ يُعِنْكَ, and if you remember, he doesn't help you. وَقِيلَ أَيُّ النَّاسِ أَعْلَمُ, which people know most? He said, أَشَدُّهُمْ لِلَّهِ خَشْيَةً, the ones that have the most awe of Allah. And then they said, فَأَخْبِرْنَا بِخِيَارِنَا, tell us who are the best of us, نُجَالِسْ, that we can sit with them. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. الَّذِينِ إِذَا رُؤُوا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى, those who when they're seen, God is remembered. قَالُوا فَأَيُّ النَّاسِ شَرٌّ, which are the people that are the worst? Allahumma ghafra, oh Allah, forgive us, the Prophet ﷺ said. قَالُوا أَخْبِرْنَا يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ, oh please tell us. And he said, الْعُلَمَاءُ إِذَا فَسَدُوا, scholars if they go bad. The Prophet said, the people that laugh the most in this life will cry the most in the next. The people that have the most like farah in this life, he's talking about being happy about dunya. He said they'll have the greatest grief on the day of judgment. And then this is very important. He says there's 5 qualities that true scholars have. خمس من الأخلاق هي من علامات علماء الآخرة مفهومة من 5 آيات من كتاب الله. And you can derive this from 5 ayahs in the Quran. The first one is khashya, so awe. The second is khushu', which is reverence in the heart. The third is tawadu', which is humility. The fourth is husnul khuluq, which is beautiful character. And the fifth is itharul akhirati ala dunya. And we also call that zuhud. So it's preferring the next life over this life, and this is called detachment. Sometimes it's translated as asceticism, but detachment is better, because in our tradition, you can have dunya and still be considered zahid, as long as it's in your hand. So if you lose it, you don't fall apart. It's just mashallah. It's like this, you're in the hub. If you're in the hub, you can have dunya be on the top or on the bottom. It becomes the same. So the first one, khashya, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء, those who have awe of God are the ulama. The khushu', خَاشِعِينَ لِلَّهِ, also قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ. So khushu', خَاشِعِينَ لِلَّهِ لَا يَشْتَرُونَ بِآيَاتِ اللَّهِ ثَمَنًا قَلِيلًا. They don't sell the signs of God for some cheap price. تواضع واخفض جناحك لمن اتبعك من المؤمنين, that lower the wing of humbleness to those who follow you from amongst the believers. So the Prophet ﷺ was commanded to do that. He said, أمرني ربي أن أتواضع. I was commanded to be humble. حتى لا يفخر أحد على أحد, so that nobody would boast of being better than anybody. وَلَا يَبْغِيَ أَحَدٌ عَلَى أَحَدٍ, and nobody would oppress anybody. So if he's commanded to be humble, and he has every right to do men on us, but he wasn't. لَا تَمُنُّ عَلَيَّ إِسْلَامُكُمْ. أَمَّا حُسْنُ الْخُلُقِ فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. By the mercy of your Lord, you're لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. Like you look now at these shayateen, everybody's fleeing from them. Right? These people that are claiming to be some dawla Islamiyah, everybody's running away from them. So they're not following the prophetic sunnah. If they were following the Prophet, that people would want to flock to them, go to them. But no, they're fleeing. لو كنت فظا غليظ القلب لانفضوا من حولك. If you were harsh and hard-hearted, they would flee from you. So these people they have fadada, they have harshness and ghilza. And they'll say, well, يَجِدُ فِيكُمْ غِلظَةً, let them find harshness. That's what they use. They read the Quran, they don't understand the Quran. They don't understand the Quran. And as for zuhud, وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ وَيْلَكُمْ ثَوَابَ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ لِمَنْ آمَنَ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا. As for those who were given knowledge, they say, watch out, the reward of God is better for those who believe and do good deeds than this dunya. So you should prefer the akhirah over dunya, the people who have knowledge. And then the Prophet ﷺ was asked when he recited فَمَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ أَنْ يَهْدِيَهُ يَشْرَحْ صَدْرُهُ لِلْإِسْلَامِ. Those who Allah wants to guide, He expands their breast to Islam. They said, what is this expansion? He said, إِنَّ النُّورَ إِذَا قُذِفَ فِي الْقَلْبِ أَنْشَرَحْ لَهُ الصَّدْرُ وَانْفَسَحْ. That when the light of Iman enters the heart, if it's thrust into the heart becomes expansive. قِيلَ فَهَلْ لِي ذَلِكَ مِنْ عَلَامَةٍ. Is there a sign of that? قال صلى الله عليه وسلم نعم التجافي عن دار الغرور. That you move away, you don't want to be in the abode of delusion. دار الغرور. وَالْإِنَابَةُ إِلَى دار الخلود. And your inclination is toward the eternal abode. وَالْإِسْتِعْدَادُ لِلْمَوْتِ قَبْلَ نُزُولِهِ. And getting prepared for death before it comes upon you. Those are the signs. And then the 10th one, أن يكون أكثر بحثه عن علم الأعمال. He's more concerned about knowledge that relates to actions. Imam Malik didn't like theoretical knowledge. He wanted to know. You know, one of the interesting things about Malik radiallahu anhu, he memorized over 100,000 hadith. He was a hafil. His Muwatta only has 800 hadith. He spent 40 years taking it down. And when Abul Qasim, when his teacher went into his house, his student went into his house, he found all these hadiths written that Malik had collected over the years. He couldn't believe how many he'd collected, and he never related any of them. And he said, Aratallah bi'ilmika ya Abul Qasim. You wanted Allah for your knowledge. You weren't there just to show people how much you knew. They used to say, Hadithna bihadha hadith. He said, La uhaddithu bihi. He knew the hadith, but he said, I don't relate that. And they said, but so-and-so relates it. And he said, then go to so-and-so. He was interested in hadith that related to actions. And there are many hadiths that there's no action on them. And that's why he was very concerned about the amal of the people of Medina, because he was interested in action. How do you implement these things? And that's why the hadith, see, one of the problems amongst modern Muslims is that they read hadith and they're not trained to read hadith. The collections of hadith were written for scholars. They weren't written for common people. And many of those hadiths have no application. Many of them are not meant to be implemented. They were collected. And some of them, the ulama recognized that there were problems. They're not just problems in the sanad. Sometimes there's a problem in the matan itself, even though the sanad is sahih. But people don't know that. And that's why it's very important to learn a madhab, because the ulama, that's what they did. They looked at all these hadiths. There's only 500 hadith, about 500, that relate to fiqh. There's only a few hundred hadith that are absolutely certain at the same level of the Quran. And those were the things that Imam Malik was much more interested in. So the hadith are a source of, they can lead you astray. Ibn Wahb, one of the greatest muhaddithin in our tradition, literally, if he had a hadith, it was considered a solid hadith. Ibn Wahb said, I learned so many hadith I became confused. This is one of the greatest scholars in the history of Islam who's saying that I learned hadith, tahayyartu. وَلَوْلَا مَالِكْ وَاللَّيْثِ لَهَلَكْتُ. And if it wasn't for Malik and Layth, I would have perished from the hadith. He went to Malik and Malik would say, La, utruk hada, leave that one. Khud hada, leave that one, take that one. So he clarified it for him. So now you've got common people buying Sahih al-Bukhari and getting confused. And what's it say that? Sayyidina Ali, it says he burnt Christians in Palestine. So then they say, okay, we should burn Christians in Iraq. Seriously. First of all, any hadith, I don't care what collection it's in, any hadith that puts Sayyidina Ali in a bad light is a negative hadith. I don't care what collection it's in. I don't care how sound the narration is. And these things crept into even the best of the books. It's just the nature of the beast, right? Because there was, unfortunately, a lot of fitna at that time. So any hadith that makes Sayyidina Ali look bad. You look at the claim about Hassan ibn Ali, how he was marrying everybody and divorcing. Any hadith that makes Hassan look bad, you have to question it. This is a reality. But this is for the ulama. This isn't for common people. This is for the ulama to do, the people of tadqiq, of tahqiq. So that's very important. And that's why if you want to read hadith, read Riyadh al-Salihin, because he wrote it for all of us, but you should still read it with somebody preferably. Most of them are pretty straightforward, but they need commentary sometimes. The 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi, excellent. There's only one problematic hadith in there. Umirtu an uqatil an-nas. I was told to kill people or fight people. Muqatala, one of the great commentators of that said, Muqatala has different meanings in Arabic. One of them, it means yadfa'uhum. Like for instance, if somebody walks by in your prayer, you put your hand up. If he keeps going, فَلْيُقَاتِلْهُ. Right? That doesn't mean you try to kill him. It just means you push him back. Right? I mean, but this is a problem. People read these things and they think they know Arabic. So that's one of the aspects that's really, really dangerous about our tradition, is that you should look for knowledge that is acted upon. أما يفسدها ويشوش القلوب ويحيجر الوسواس ويثير الشر. So you shouldn't go to those that will corrupt you or confuse you. Tashwish. And the hadith will confuse you. And that's why we follow what the fuqaha. They said that the muhaddithun were sayadila. The muhaddithun are pharmacists. You don't go to a pharmacist to get a cure. The faqih goes to the pharmacist. He's the tabib. So he's the one that writes the prescription. The pharmacist, all he has is the raw material. Right? But the doctor tells him what to put together. In classical tradition, now, you go and it's all made by some corporation. But in those days, the pharmacist had all the raw material, and then the hakim would write the ingredients to put in, like the different herbs. Like if you go to Dr. Yang, I've been to his clinic where he has all the herbs. He knows which herbs to put in, and he writes to he's got a pharmacist, he writes the herbs, and then the pharmacist puts them together because he's a tabib. But you don't go to the pharmacist to get them to diagnose you. And that's what, like going to muhaddithun to say, oh, what's the ruling on this? The muhaddith doesn't know the ruling. All he knows is the hadith. The faqih is the one that knows the ruling. And the best of the fuqaha were those that were also muhaddithun, like Malik. He's the only one out of the imams that happened to be a full-fledged. All of them had hadith. Imam Shafi'i relates hadith, Abu Hanifa relates hadith, Ahmed was definitely a muhaddith. But Malik all of his hadith were sound. Ahmed related weak hadith. Malik didn't relate any weak hadith. So he was the gold standard for muhaddithun. And that's one of his imtiyazat. But all of them, كلهم ملتمس من رسول الله. كلهم من رسول الله ملتمسون. All of them are taken from the Prophet ﷺ. And they're all rightly guided, all of them, the 4 imams. We should love them all equally, and we shouldn't be fanatic or prefer our imam over the other ones. From iman is to love them equally, the 4 imams. But I'm Maliki, so there's that naz'ah. And then they said about Hudayfa that, this is interesting. Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah, his words were most like the words of the prophets, according to the Salaf. And they reflected the guidance of the Sahaba. And most of what he talked about was the states of the heart and how actions were corrupted, and the wasawis of the nufus, and hidden diseases, and the shahwat of the nafs, the desires of the soul. And so it was said to him, Ya Aba Sa'id, you speak words that we don't hear from other than you. Where did you get it? And he said, from Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman. And then they said to Hudayfa, we see you speaking words that we don't hear from the other Sahaba. Where did you get it? He said, Khassani bihi Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The Prophet, he specified me, took me out. Why? كَانَ النَّاسِ يَسَلُونَهُ عَنَ الْخَيْرِ وَكُنْتُ أَسَلُهُ عَنَ الشَّرِّ. They used to ask about good, but I asked about evil. مَخَافَةَ أَنْ يَقَعَ فِيهِ, because I was afraid that I would fall into it. وَعَلِمْتُ أَنَّ الْخَيْرَ لَا يَسْبِقُنِي. The khair was already there, right? He wouldn't. So he wanted to find out about evil. And so he said, so one time I started asking the Prophet ﷺ, and they were asking, and then I asked about evil, or what corrupts the good actions. And so when the Prophet saw that I was concerned about what corrupts actions, he gave me this knowledge. And he had the knowledge of the munafiqeen as well. In fact, Omar wouldn't pray on anybody if Hudayfa didn't show up for his janazah, because he knew that he was a hypocrite. Because Hudayfa wouldn't go to the janazah of the hypocrite. Even though he wouldn't tell people who was a munafiq, but he wouldn't pray on them. So Omar, if he saw that Hudayfa was absent in the funeral, he used to go home. And Omar asked him, am I a hypocrite? And he said, La wallah. And then after that, he said this knowledge, Imam Al-Ghazali says, this concern about the stations of the heart and its states, this is the concern of the ulama of the akhirah, because the heart is what takes you to God. And then he said, but this knowledge has become strange in our time. It's mundaris. It's literally disappeared. And he said, if a scholar talks about it, that other scholars consider it strange. And he said, this is a problem, because they're only interested in argumentation and proving their points and things like that. So, and then the 11th, أن يكون اعتماده في علومه على بصيرته وإدراكه بصفاء قلبه لا على الصحف والكتب ولا على تقليد ما يسمعه من غيره. That he should be reliant on the knowledges that come from this inner eye. He's talking about the ulama of akhirah, and that are understood because of the purity of his heart, not on the books and on what's been written. And he said, and not taqleed, but about what he's heard from others. So it's important, astafti qalbik walaw aftawka an-nas, that listen to your heart even if you get fatwa from other people. So this comes from, because sometimes things are just wrong and they don't ring true. And even if a great scholar said it, it could be wrong. And so that's important to remember. So he says that. And then he talks about how the early people didn't like to write books. In fact, Ahmed ibn Hanbal was troubled by the fact that Imam Malik wrote the Muwatta initially, because they didn't write books. But later he realized the importance, and he himself wrote a book. But the point is that they were worried about that, about doing anything that hadn't been done earlier, because people would rely on these things and forget the true knowledge, which is ilm al-yaqeen. And then finally the 12th one, أن يكون شديد التوقي من محدثات الأمور, that he should beware of bid'ah. وإن اتفق عليها الجمهور, even if everybody's doing it. And he says, don't be deluded by the fact lots of people are doing it. And so he said, be sure that you're doing what came from our Prophet ﷺ. And so he said, وَعَلَمْ تَحْقِيقًا أَنَّ أَعْلَمْ أَهْلِ الزَّمَانِ وَأَقْرَبُهُمْ إِلَى الْحَقِّ أَشْبَهُمْ بِالصَّحَابَةِ وَأَعْرَفُهُمْ بِالطَّرِيقِ السَّلَفِ. That the true and the soundest people are the ones that are most like the Sahaba and the closest to the Salaf. فَمِنْهُمْ أُخِذَ الدِّينِ. From them the knowledge was taken. And Sayyidina Ali said, خَيْرُنَا أَتْبَعُنَا لِهَذَا الدِّينِ. The best of us are those who follow the deen the best, in the best way. And that was said to, and he said that when somebody said, خَالَفْتَ فُلَانَ, you went against so-and-so, and he meant the previous caliphs, because he disagreed with some of their fatwas. So Imam Ali did not make taqleed of even Omar, or if he did disagree with it, because he was mujtahid mutlaq. And this is not for us, it's for the ulama. And then he said, Al-Hasan said, muhdathani uhditha fil Islam. Two innovations came into this religion. رجل ذو رأي سوء زعم أن الجنة لمن رأى مثل رأيه. A bad man of the opinion that Jannah is only for those who think like him. A lot of people like that. وَمُتْرَفٌ يَعْبُدُ الدُّنْيَا. And extravagant people that worship this world. لَهَا يَغْضَبُ وَلَهَا يَرْضَى. Gets angry because of it, and he's pleased with it. فَارْفُضُوهُمَا إِلَى النَّارِ. Just reject them to the fire. إِنَّ رَجُلٌ أَصْبَحْ فِي هَذِهِ الدُّنْيَا بَيْنَ مُتْرَفٍ يَدْعُوهُ إِلَى دُنْيَاهُ. So he's between an extravagant one calling him to dunya and a mubtada' calling him to his bid'ah. And then he mentions the hadith, the famous hadith of the Prophet, that every muhdatha, inna kulla muhdathatin bid'ah, every innovated thing is every new thing is a bid'ah, and every bid'ah is a dalala. And obviously, our ulama categorize that into 5 types of bid'ah. That means every bid'ah that's not from the deen. Man ahdatha fi amrina hadha ma laysa minhu. Aisha relates that hadith. Imam Nawawi relates it in his 40. Whoever brings something into the religion, ma laysa minhu, that's not from it in the first place. So for instance, none of the Sahaba used a watch to determine prayer time. None of them. But determining prayer times is from the religion. So if you use a watch to do it, it's a bid'ah because they didn't do it, but it's acceptable because it's from the religion. So it's not just this blanket rejection of everything. Like the mawlid, ta'zeem of the Prophet is from the sunnah. لِتُوَقِّرُوهُ. You were told to show him tawqir. لِتُعَظِّمُوهُ. That's what it means. تُوَقِّرُوهُ وَتُعَزِّرُوهُ. So some of them, when they saw that people were losing that love of the Prophet ﷺ, they said, here's a good thing to celebrate. Because the Prophet, first of all, Isa's birthday is celebrated in the Quran, in Surah Maryam. If you read it, it's clearly talking about his birthday and how special it was. And then he talks about being a blessed day, Yawma wulidtu, on the day I was born. Right? And then the Prophet ﷺ was asked, can I fast on Monday? And he said, Fihi wulidtu, I was born on that day. In other words, it's a good day just because I was born on it. That's in Sahih Muslim. So there's a basis for it. Now some of the ulama said, well, the Salaf didn't do it, so it's better not to do it. That's fine. But to say that it's not from the religion to be happy that the Prophet was born, that is haram. Because if you're not happy he was born, you're a kafir. Right? If you're not happy he was born, you're a kafir. But how do we celebrate that? That's where the fuqaha put their opinions forward. So, you can read both fatwas, see which ones make sense. I met a man in Medina who told me that he actually was against the mawlid, but then when he read a book written by one of the scholars in Saudi against the mawlid that quoted heavily from the fatwas for the mawlid, he was more convinced by the fatwas for the mawlid than he was by the alim's argument against it. He told me that. And I have friends, for me, we have to live together. These are different, we have to live together. If people don't like those things, you have to respect their opinion if it's based on a scholar's opinion. You respect it. But you would hope they would respect your opinion that's based on another scholar? Because it's not my opinion. I didn't say you could celebrate Mawlid. Hasha, I would never say that. But I'm quoting Imam Suyuti that said you could do that. Or Imam Al-Ghazali in the Mi'yar. He gives several reasons why you can do it. I mean, it's more extensive. His fatwa is more extensive than Suyuti's. So they're the ulama. It's not me. I'm just quoting. That's naqal. That's to say, here's what the ulama said. And then you can read the other ones that say don't. That's fine. Ibn al-Hajj was of the opinion that it's better to do it throughout the year, but not to specify a date. Right? Because the Prophet ﷺ was against specifying dates. So and he was a very strict Maliki scholar. One of the hadith Ibn Mas'ud said, أنتم في زمان خيركم فيه المسارع في الأمور وسيأتي بعدكم زمان يكون خيرهم المتثبت والمتوقف لكثرة الشبهات. That you're in a time when it's better to hasten towards actions because they know. But he said, but the time is coming when it's better to slow down because there'll be so many doubtful matters. So it's better just to slow down and think about things, right? And Imam Malik radiallahu anhu said that the people that he knew, meaning the tabi'een, when they used to ask people, he said the scholars would never say haram or halal. Now they say haram and halal. He said the people that I knew, meaning the tabi'een, they just say makruh or mustahab. They used to say akrahu hada, la yu'jibuni hada, uhibbu hada. Because they were afraid. Allahu adhina lakum, did Allah give you permission? La tasifu bi alsinatikum al-kadhib. Don't let your tongues describe in a lying way. هذا حلال وهذا حرام لتفتروا على الله الكذبة. Don't become those people. So traditionally, that's what they used to do. I think we need to restore those positions now, because the haram doesn't mean anything to Muslims anymore, because everything is haram. I mean, they had a fatwa coming out of a major Muslim institution that the film Nuh was haram. But the early ulama said all films were haram. Now it's just Noah. Forget Noah. What about all the pornography in the Middle East? Maybe if he goes to Noah, he might actually get scared about the flood and make tawbah. I'm not encouraging people to go see Noah. I didn't see it. But I'm just saying, choose your fatwas, man. I mean, seriously. If you're going to worry about Noah, and you've got all these people on Google, SEX, do their little search, pornography. The highest pornography searches are coming out of Muslim countries by the Google indices, unless they're lying. They're like, kuffar yakthibun alayna, Right? Yeah, Muslims aren't well, The least of those films I'm worried about is Nuh, seriously. Or Noah. It's not even Nuh, it's just Noah. It's just a story looks like the story. He's a white guy too. I mean, give me a break. Isn't he from Australia, that guy? Yeah. Okay, isn't it Kiwi? Yeah. So anyway, that's what he says. Now so he says these are 10 signs that you can tell the ulama of the akhirah with. And this is the akhlaq of the ulama as-salaf. And so he says, be one of two. Either have these qualities or at least admit that you don't have them and you're in trouble, right? But don't be in denial. So work to try to acquire these qualities. Yeah. وإياك أن تكون الثالث فتلبس على نفسك. So you're just fooling yourself. بأن تلقب عادة الدنيا بالدين, right? And then you're just using the dunya for the deen. وتشبه سيرة البطالين بسيرة العلماء. And you're making these imposters, these charlatans look like the real ulama ar-rasikhin. And by that, your ignorance, you become amongst those who perish. نعوذ بالله من خدع الشيطان. We seek refuge from the tricks of shaitan. فبها هلك الجمهور. The vast majority of people perish because of them. ونسأل الله تعالى أن يجعلنا ممن لا تغره الحياة الدنيا ولا يغره بالله الغرور. And we ask Allah to make us from those who are not deluded by this world, and the deluder, shaitan, does not delude us. So the last chapter is a short chapter. Alhamdulillah, Shaykh Al-Ghazali actually really covered the topic pretty well. So I was pleased. I asked him to talk about something else, but he talked about that, so it worked well. But he mentions a hadith, Al-Rafi'i relates it, it's marfu', but it's got definitely weakness. Al-Shaykh fi qawmihi kan-nabi fi ummatihi. The Shaykh in his amongst his people is like a prophet amongst his ummah. In other words, it's a source of guidance. And لَيْسَ ذَلِكَ لِكَثْرَةِ مَالِهِ. It's not because he has a lot of wealth or because he's a big personality or because of any of these things, but it's because of the fruit of his intellect. ثَمْرَةُ عَقْلِهِ. And he said, and for that reason you'll see the Turks and the Kurds and the gruff Arabs, the desert Arabs, and the rest of creation, even though they have they're uneducated people and they're a low rank in civilization at that time. I mean, obviously the Turks have great civilization, but at that time, at his time, they were actually like the Europeans at that time. I mean, the Europeans. It's interesting because the Europeans were always sexually deviant. Even when they were Christians, they had a lot of incontinence. And anybody that's ever read Chaucer will know how bad the Europeans were early on. So they're called umam al-mutawahisha, the wild barbarian civilizations. Right? It's interesting, like the Arab, they say, the middle people, they're really civilized, and then the two extremes, they're all uncivilized. Right? Do you buy that? But that's what he says, that even though they have this low rank, they're not civilized, they still يوقرون المشايخ بالطبع. They still have this immense respect for their teachers in their nature. And it's a good quality to respect teachers. And then he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called beneficial knowledge ruh, which is life. And he called it life. So, وَكَذَلِكَ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ رُوحًا مِنْ أَمْرِنَا. We reveal to you a spirit from our command. So, knowledge gives you life. Without knowledge, you're like a dead person. أَوَ مَنْ كَانَ مَيِّتًا or مَيْتًا فَأَحْيَيْنَاهُ وَجَعَلْنَا لَهُ نُورًا يَمْشِي بِهِ فِي النَّاسِ. Right? Haven't you seen the one who was dead and we brought him to life with knowledge? And it's a light that he walks amongst mankind with. And Allah says, يُخْرِجُهُم مِّنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. See, he uses the plural in dhulumat and the singular in nur. He takes them from the darkness of multiplicity, from the darkness of shahawat, to the light of tawheed, to the light of the integral light, the holistic light of true knowledge. And the Prophet ﷺ said, this is, Imam Al-Ghazali in this section relies heavily on Dawood ibn al-Muhabbar. Dawood ibn al-Muhabbar wrote a book called Kitab al-Aql, and he quotes a lot of hadiths about the place of the intellect in Islam. And it was a very popular book. Unfortunately, as a muhaddith, he wasn't really relied upon, and so the hadith tend to be, some consider them fabricated. Ibn al-Jawzi did. Imam al-Bukhari considered him very weak. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal was asked about him, and his فَضَحِكَ just said he kind of, laughed when he was asking, what do you think? And he just, ضَحِكَ, which means, yeah, we're not giving a lot of credence. But Abu Dawud radiallahu anhu wathaqahu, considered him to be sound. So these are khilafat amongst the muhaddithin, and this is a problem with the hadith tradition, is that some of the muhaddithin will say he's weak, others will say he's strong, and this is why you have a lot of different opinion about these things. Generally, the hadiths make a lot of sense, and I think that's why Imam Al-Ghazali, who was not a master of hadith, and he admits that, and this has been one of the major criticisms of his book by his critics, is that he put hadiths there that weren't highly considered by scholars. But he was a brilliant man, and he certainly wouldn't quote something that he didn't think was sound in terms of its meaning. And so he quotes these hadiths. One of them, and many of these hadiths are mentioned by some of the other scholars as well. But one of them, أَوْلُ مَا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ الْعَقْلِ. The first thing that Allah created was the intellect. فَقَالَ لَهُ أَقْبِلْ, come, فَأَقْبَلَ, and it came. ثُمَّ قَالَ لَهُ أَدْبِرْ, go, and it moved back. ثُمَّ قَالَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى وَعِزَّتِي وَجَلَالِي مَا خَلَقْتُ خَلْقًا أَكْرَمَ عَلَيَّ مِنْكَ بِكَ آخُذُ وَبِكَ أُعْطِي وَبِكَ أُثِيبُ وَبِكَ أُعَاقِبُ. I haven't created anything more noble than you, and by you I give, by you I take, and by you I reward, and by you I punish. And so he quotes that. And then he mentions several other hadiths about the place of aql. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri mentioned لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ دِعَامَةٍ, everything has a foundation. وَدِعَامَةُ الْمُؤْمِنِ عَقْلُهُ, and the foundation of a believer is his intelligence. وَبِقَدْرِ عَقْلِهِ تَكُونُ عِبَادَتُهُ, according to his intellect, that's going to be the foundation of his devotion. أَمَا سَمِعْتُمْ قَوْلَ الْفُجَّارِ لَوْ كُنَّا نَسْمَعُ أَوْ نَعْقِلُ مَا كُنَّا فِي أَصْحَابِ السَّعِيرِ. Allah says in the Quran, had we only listened and used our intellects, because it's one thing to hear, but if you don't understand it, it's of no benefit. So in Jahannam, فَاعْتَرَفُوا, they finally admit, لَوْ كُنَّا نَسْمَعُ أَوْ نَعْقِلُ مَا كُنَّا فِي أَصْحَابِ السَّعِيرِ. We wouldn't be here if we used our brains. And so it's the aql that keeps you out of hell. I mean, that's a clear from Surah Mulk. Umar radiallahu anhu said to Tamim ad-Dari, what is uprightness with you? He said, al-aql. And he said, it's true what you say. So there are many hadiths that he relates. He relates a hadith, again it's from Dawood ibn Muhabbir from Kitab al-Aql, that the Prophet was reported to, Aisha was reported to have asked the Prophet ﷺ, بِمَا يَتَفَاضَلُ النَّاسِ فِي الدُّنْيَا, how are people preferred one over the other in this world? بِالْعَقْلِ, with intelligence. قُلْتُ وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ, and in the akhirah, بِالْعَقْلِ. وَقُلْتُ أَلَيْسَ إِنَّمَا يُجْزَانُ بِعَمَالِهِمْ, aren't they rewarded with their actions? فقال صلى الله عليه وسلم يا عائشة هل عملوا إلا بقدر ما أعطاهم الله من العقل? Do people only act according to what God's given them from their intelligence? In other words, it's intelligence that gets you to act. When you're following your shahawat, you've capitulated. The intellect's capitulated to the shahawat. It's the intellect that should rule. And when it rules. So the ulama basically say, be careful with hadiths that have these, because the Mu'tazilite were there, and this was definitely their method. But I would recommend for all of you to read John Walbridge's book, which is The Caliphate of Reason. It's a very important book in my estimation. He's an Orientalist from the United States, but he was here in Turkey at Ithar for a little while. He knows Dr. Rajab. It's a brilliant book. I found it really to be an excellent book. What he clearly demonstrates in that book, and in some ways it was a book I would have liked to have written, because it just dovetailed so much with many of my conclusions about the crises in the Muslim world. But what he clearly shows in that book is that the Sunni intellectual tradition was a tradition completely predicated on the intelligence, the aql. And this idea that the Mu'tazilite were the rationalists and Ahl Sunnah were not is a complete fabrication. It's a modern fabrication. The Muslims, the Mu'tazilite were a necessary confrontation with Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. It was necessary for them to work out their positions. And so it was actually a very useful event. And the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith of Hudayfa in Sahih al-Bukhari, I have an exaggerated vasovagal response. I really do. So like loud noises just send me through the roof. If people honk behind me, like I'm like, please don't honk, I'm neurotic or something, I want to get a bumper sticker. Because I literally go through the roof. It's just, I have what they call Barlow's syndrome. So when my mother was pregnant, I think she had rubella or something. And at least, I wasn't born without a brain, which sometimes happens. But the nervous system gets wired a little. So they really, like I feel it in every cell of my body, those loud noises. That's why I really like quiet. I spend a lot of time in quiet, and I like peace and quiet.